So let's talk about the fall of 2025. This was a time when a whole series of crises, one after another, just slammed into the United States, pushing the country into, well, completely uncharted territory. You had political chaos, real economic pain, and just shocking violence all coming together at once. It really felt like it was testing the very fabric of the nation. So yeah, let's dive right in and unpack what was going on.
Okay, so what was the flashpoint? The one event that just seemed to pull all that tension together and make it explode. It was a political assassination. And look, this wasn't just a crime. This was like throwing a lit match into a room full of gasoline.
So let's just lay out the basic facts here. We're talking about September 10th, 2025. Charlie Kirk, you probably know him, a really prominent conservative voice, co-founder of Turning Point USA, he was assassinated. He was speaking at Utah Valley University, and get this, it was the very first stop on his big American comeback tour. But you gotta understand, this assassination, it didn't just happen out of nowhere. It wasn't in a vacuum. The whole country was already basically a tinderbox. The federal government itself was, for all intents and purposes, paralyzed. What was going on? Well, we had a full-blown federal government shutdown, a lapse in appropriations, as they call it, and that meant everything that wasn't deemed essential just stopped. Federal workers were sent home, and you could just feel this deep, growing sense of instability everywhere. And if you want a perfect example of just how charged the atmosphere was, check this out. An executive order was signed, and it officially renamed the Department of Defense. And what did they rename it to? Its original name, the Department of War. I mean, talk about symbolism, right? It really tells you everything you need to know about the mood of the country. So, the political stage is set. But beyond all that drama in D.C., the shutdown was having a devastating, immediate impact on millions of regular people. We're talking about a genuine humanitarian crisis starting to unfold. And here's the number that just stops you in your tracks. 42 million. That's not a typo. 42 million people. Kids, the elderly, working families were suddenly facing a cutoff of their November food benefits. Just gone. Now, for anyone who might not know, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistant Program. It's basically the government's main program for helping low-income people put food on the table. For literally millions of families, it's not just a help, it's the only way they can afford to buy groceries. So this begs a huge question, right? Because the country had been through government shutdowns before, but SNAP benefits had never been cut off. So why this time? What was different? Why, for the first time ever, was the government pulling the plug on food for 42 million people? Okay, so here's where the fight was. On one side, you had the USDA, the department that runs SNAP. They said, hey, our hands are tied. There's a government shutdown, a lapse in appropriations, and we legally cannot touch our contingency funds. But on the other side, you had a whole bunch of states basically calling their bluff. They said, no, you have the money. You have the legal precedent. This isn't a necessity, it's a choice you're making. And this wasn't just some argument in the newspapers or on cable news. Oh no, this blew up into a massive legal battle. We're talking about more than half the states in the country suing the federal government. And the whole lawsuit really boiled down to one number, $6 billion, with a B. The states pointed to this contingency reserve fund and said, look, there's $6 billion sitting right there. This wasn't some imaginary number, it was real money, they argued, set aside for exactly this kind of emergency. And this wasn't just a handful of states, it was a huge coordinated effort, 26 states plus DC. You had big states like California and New York, industrial states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, even southern states like North Carolina, all banding together for this lawsuit. And this quote right here, pulled straight from the legal filing, really says it all. USDA suspended SNAP benefits even though it has funds available to it that are sufficient. The bottom line of their argument was simple. The money was there, which meant, in their view, this whole crisis was manufactured. It was completely avoidable. So, okay, you've got a shocking political assassination and a looming hunger crisis happening at the exact same time. As you can probably guess, the public reaction was just explosive. All the deep divisions in the country were suddenly out in the open for everyone to see. So, from one perspective, you had voices like Fox News host Jesse Waters. He framed the assassination in really stark, almost battlefield terms. He said, they are at war with us, and talked about avenging Charlie Kirk's death. And then the reaction from other corners was just as intense, but in a totally different way. After the assassination, reports started flooding in about people getting fired from their jobs. We're talking teachers, firefighters, even people in the military, all for making social media posts that were seen as celebrating his death. But in the middle of all that, there were also voices calling for calm. For instance, the left-wing streamer Hassan Piker, who was actually supposed to debate Kirk, he called the whole thing terrifying, and he warned that all this talk about vengeance was becoming genuinely worrisome. So you step back and look at the whole picture. The assassination, the government shutdown, renaming the Defense Department the Department of War, and 42 million people about to lose their food assistance. It all adds up to a nation under a kind of pressure that, frankly, it hadn't seen in modern memory. This wasn't just one thing going wrong, it was the entire system being stressed right to its breaking point. And really, that leaves all of us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? When political violence is no longer just a hypothetical, when the basic functions of government just stop working, and when the people are this divided, this angry, what's left to hold a country together? What's the glue?